And we are back on the Zero Hour with writer Zaid Jilani, who is a contributing writer at Alternet. And Zaid, I also forgot to mention before we went to break, I'm interested in the piece you wrote about Hillary Clinton, pointing out that while Hillary was Secretary of State, foreign corporations in favor of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, big story in the news right now, paid Bill, of course her husband, former President Bill Clinton, over $1 million. Now you add, or your headline writer anyway, who summarizes, could Clinton's silence on the matter be due to a serious conflict of interest? Well, could it?
I think that there have been sort of several stories now. I mean, obviously there's that book, Clinton Cash, which is by sort of a more conservative writer, but there's also, stories by David Sirota and Matthew Cunningham Cook at IBT, and obviously there's my story and a couple others that kind of are looking at the fact that the Clintons are almost unique among presidential candidates. I mean, maybe you'd have to go back to Ronald Reagan or something like that for people who have parlayed from one political position to spending quite a bit of time in the private sector to then running for president. Usually, you're governor and you run for president, you're senator, run for president. So basically, what happened, and I went to an event with Bill Clinton one time, and he joked about this. He said that, they were dirt poor when they left the White House, is what he considered it. They weren't, actually dirt poor by, actual standards of being poor, but he meant relatively. But he said that he came into a lot of money, and what he meant by that is that between the year 2000 to the present, they made almost more than $100 million, primarily from giving speeches to people. And most of that is Bill Clinton. And Hillary did a little bit after she left Secretary of State, but most of it is Bill, though. To me, the surprising thing, and something that should concern people, is that, Bill Clinton didn't even cease this when Hillary was Secretary of State. And everyone has to remember that spousal income is shared. So if somebody gives money to your husband, it's your money, too, and that's why it's required to be disclosed. And particularly, there's a few areas that are really troubling. I mean, David Sirota just had a report that said that something like $40 million went from the State Department to companies that had paid Bill Clinton for speeches. And in my report, I talk about $1.5 million going directly to Bill and Hillary Clinton's bank accounts from companies, foreign companies, that were advocating for Trans-Pacific Partnership. So, to me, it's not so much a matter of, okay, someone gives me money, so I'm going to do exactly what they say because they're my boss. It's not necessarily like that. It's more of the sense of like, they're giving me money because they feel like I'm friendly to them. I want to kind of keep them around. I might do a little bit of what they say or a lot of it of what they say, but, they're going to continue to behave in somewhat of a manner to keep the money going. And I think that's the biggest problem here. It's not so much straight quid pro quo, because it sort of changes people's calculations and sort of the culture of the business and the culture of their operations. I think that this is something Hillary and Bill are going to have to explain to Americans, and they should explain to Americans, is, why did they decide to go this route? Why did they keep taking so much money from corporations they were in charge of regulating, or they were in charge of giving grants and funding to? Why did they do that? It's not something that, every president has always done. It's actually a relatively new phenomenon in American political culture, actually probably the last 20 to 30 years.
And I guess, one of the things that strikes me about it, well, a couple things. One is, yes, I think you asked a great question. Why did they continue to do it? Because by the time Hillary became Secretary of State in 2009, they were no longer by any stretch of the imagination dirt poor. So I don't think that, there was a famous gaffe when she said we were poor when we left the White House. It was a misstatement, but I kind of understand they had financial anxiety, they had expenses. Okay, again, they didn't have it in 2009, so I don't understand the judgment issue. I mean, it calls into question for me a certain common sense, proportionality, sense of judgment, sense of accountability, and so on. But the other side of it that I want to ask you about, Zaid, is when you bring these issues up among liberals, progressives, however you want to define broader community of people, a lot of times I find that I get attacked as if somehow I have now joined forces with the Swift boaters and the Fox News crowd. Isn't there a way to create room for this as a legitimate conversation on the left about whether this is appropriate or not, and how it should be addressed?
Well, I mean, I think that you kind of have to make a separation. There's people who are very engaged in politics, and they have people they really like. There were people like that when President Bush was president. There's people like that who feel like that about President Obama. There's a lot of people who feel like that about Hillary Clinton. I mean, she's been in politics for 25 years and longer than that, actually. So, there are people who I think they feel very strong attachments to individuals. But, what I would say is that you have to remember, these people, no matter who they are, what political party they're from or whatever, they are public servants. And, we're their employers. I mean, we're evaluating their performance. And I would say that we should be doing that with everyone. And as for, if you have concerns about the election, it's not, it's not a terrible thing to have concerns about who's elected and to want Democrats to defeat Republicans. I mean, you might think they're much better for the country. If you have those concerns, then it's not necessarily, our fault for raising these concerns. It's more, more of a fault that the situation exists, right? Because if you and I, as writers or, radio hosts, whatever, are talking about this with our meager resources, imagine what the Koch brothers, who are going to pour $1 billion into the election, imagine what they could do with these facts, right? It's the reality that's the problem. It's not the fact that we are talking about the reality. We didn't invent all these things. We didn't invent this behavior by the Clintons. For example, after Hillary left Secretary of State position, she actually went and did a couple different events at Goldman Sachs, paid events, right?
Right.
We don't know exactly what she said, but there were some leaks to Politico that basically said that she said that people should stop bashing bankers, right? But we don't have audio or video. But think about it. There were hundreds of executives from Goldman Sachs. Imagine if in October 2016, someone decided to record that, and they just, they put out a video of Hillary Clinton talking about how great banks are and why are we complaining about such an important part of the economy or something like that, right? I can imagine any of those things. At that point, I think we will have all kicked ourselves for not vetting her tougher, right? For not saying, why don't we, why doesn't she have some sort of coming in terms with this, or at least maybe some apology for some of Bill's speech-making behavior, or maybe we could have just gone with another candidate. So I think, this vetting process is actually really, really important, and you want to do it up front. We do it with everyone in our lives. When we make a new friend, we want to make sure our friends are good people. When we have a significant other, we want to make sure you marry the right person. You want to have a good relationship, right? We do this with everybody in our lives. So I think, it's time we start treating politicians the same way, because if we want better politicians, then we have to be better citizens, right?
Right, and I think we're talking with writer Zaid Jilani, and right now at the moment we're talking about Hillary Clinton and questions about fees paid to Bill, to their common financial interest, and conflict of interest, how that might play into it. I guess I agree with everything you've said, and I've also, if you truly want progressive reform in this country, I think it's not enough to have your default position be, well, that's the best we've got. That's our team against their team. Don't criticize our team. I think, I guess I look at it more the way you do, which is systemically we need a better system, and we need to point out the flaws in the system. And if we're going to invest, as you say, our hopes in a specific candidate, we better be aware of all the weaknesses of the candidate before we do that. And I like your point also that maybe she could start to address them, because frankly, I think these issues, I think the Republicans will exploit them to the max, and I think the Democrats are asleep at the switch. They have no idea how this is going to hit them come election time, and I don't know. I worry about it. I've got to say, I worry about it.